Well, good morning and welcome to the Belong Collective. We are obviously not gathering as a community today due to COVID-19. Thank you for being patient with us and understanding as much of your life is probably being interrupted by this. Maybe for you, you're going to be home for the next couple weeks with your children. Maybe for you, not much is changing. I don't know your experience, but I just want to say that as a community, we're going to be taking all the precautions that we can to ensure that we do our part to flatten the curve. If you are unfamiliar with that term, we posted a video from Science Mike, which I think is really helpful. I know this is an adjustment for many of us. Some of us may be technology and meeting in this way and consuming a life connection, a sermon in this way isn't really something that we're familiar with, but I just want to encourage you that over the next few weeks, it looks like this will probably be the way that we're gathering. And as a community, we're going to do our best to give you maybe even some daily content in this way. We're upset that our gathering at ABC had to be canceled because we were so excited to show you that potential new venue for the Belong Collective. And we've already been talking with ABC staff, and we're ready to reschedule the moment the opportunity presents itself and that it's wise for us to regather physically. And so just stay tuned for that because we will be gathering there. That is the goal at some point for kind of a trial run. So stay tuned for that. I had a sermon planned for today, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought I really want to give a sermon that maybe connects with where some of us are right now instead of what I had planned. Not that what I had planned isn't relevant even for now, but I just think specifically right now, as I've heard from a lot of different people, talked to a lot of different people who of faith and people not of faith. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of concern. And I want to consider like what we do with that. Maybe you're in a place right now of fear. Maybe that's your the emotion, the anxiety, maybe even of all of this. Maybe it's even just the anxiety of your normal routine being disrupted because you're a very routine-oriented individual. Maybe it's not as much about a virus, but it's more about the potential financial ramifications that it could bring in your life and in your family. There's all kinds of reasons that fear at this time can kind of dominate our mind and our spirit and ultimately even just kind of have us in a paralyzed state of sorts. And so I just really want to encourage you if that's where you're at. I really think hopefully this Life Connection will be encouraging for you. I do want to say there is a vested interest for some people to make you afraid. So just be mindful that we live in a world where if you say the shocking, fearful thing, it freaks people out. I think we should all be staying away from fear right now, trying not to be afraid, trying not to tap into things that are going to make us more afraid, going to be tailored to scaring us. At the same time, we should be responsible. We should not be ignoring everything that's happening. We talk all the time about love at the Belong Collective, and we say that we are a community that is practicing the way of love for the good of all. Flattening the curve is for the good of all. It's our communal responsibility, if you will, for the good of all. And I think it's also for the good of all for us to not tap into sources that are going to fearmonger, that are going to unnecessarily divide us in this time. So let's try to be measured in the way we think about this and the way we respond to it, and in the anxiety that we allow to kind of grip our spirit in this season. And I think there's actually an interesting story that might relate in some ways to this. Now, I want to be clear. This is not a one-for-one, but there's a story in the scriptures of the disciples and the disciples being incredibly fearful. There's actually multiple times where the disciples are fearful, but this particular part kind of fast forwards us. We're in the middle of Lent right now. And the Lent season is where we approach the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus coming on Good Friday and then Easter. And so this is a season of preparation for that. We're going to go ahead and jump ahead. Jesus has been crucified and the disciples are freaking out. Now, a little bit of backstory and a little bit of context. These disciples have been following Jesus roughly 3 years. They each kind of had their own kind of like fears, probably following Jesus in general. Like, I think the question we're all wondering right now is, how do we follow Jesus in the midst of unknown realities like the ones we're experiencing right now? We are experiencing something that is unknown, that we've never experienced before, that we've never had to plan for, that we've never had to prepare for, at least on this scale, right? And how do we go into this remaining faithful to our calling as followers of Jesus? And the disciples find themselves following Jesus, first of all, which is like a whole, like, this is an unknown. How do we do this new thing? For them, it would have been the family trait that they would have been giving their lives to, that they would have been studying for, and now they're following this rabbi around and listening to his teachings and doing these very countercultural ways of ministry. And so in that regard, the disciples are kind of always being thrust into the unknown, which is interesting because you and I, if you believe in Jesus, if you're actively following Jesus, we're called disciples, and it seems like the way of Jesus is a way that's pretty much pushing us into the unknown, challenging the status quo pretty regularly, and so we are on that journey, if you will, that is kind of a journey into the unknown in a lot of ways, of like what opportunities God might open up. It's unknown, the consequences when you love your enemy, right? It's unknown in a beautiful way in that it can bring about restoration, but it's also unknown in the challenging way that it is for us to love people who are difficult to love. Ultimately, the disciples follow Jesus all this time. There's even a moment on a boat when they're really afraid. So there's all kinds of places we could go throughout their time as disciples where they're really afraid. But there's this one moment where after Jesus is crucified, where the disciples are terrified. The word in the original Greek is that they are terrified. They're terrified because they know that they're deeply associated with Jesus, and Jesus has just been crucified, brutal death, and they know that their association could mean their death as well. And amongst the disciples, there's lots of anxiety. And this is where Jesus returns, as the resurrection takes place, and here's what happens. It says, that Sunday evening, the disciples were meeting behind locked doors because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders. I just want to pause there. They were afraid of the Jewish leaders. They were afraid of what the Jewish leaders could do to them. They were afraid of death. Like, this isn't a small thing. It's not like they were afraid that the Jewish leaders were going to make fun of them. They were afraid that the Jewish leaders were going to do to them what they did to Jesus. They were going to put them on trial, and that Rome ultimately was going to have the ability to execute them for being these, insurrectionists, these people who were coming in and challenging the system, the religious system of the time. The same way in which they created this trial for Jesus, maybe they would do the same to the disciples. And so the disciples have locked themselves away in this house together, in this area together, and they are terrified. I don't know about you. I don't know your experience with this, but maybe you feel a certain amount of connection with the disciples, or at the very least, maybe you feel the sense of like, yeah, it's not to that level, but I do feel like I'm having to isolate myself because of fear, because of anxiety, because of concern. And Jesus meets them in this place. Here's what it says. Suddenly, Jesus was standing there among them. And the first words out of Jesus' mouth in this time of fear, in this time of anxiety, is peace be with you. Peace be with you. I think we can learn a lot from that. I think right now, The voice of Jesus speaking to us is peace be with you. Peace be with you. He showed them the wounds in his hands and his side. They were filled with joy when they saw the Lord. They were filled with joy when they saw the Lord. Now, obviously, for the disciples here, this is challenging their whole paradigm. Like, Jesus was dead. Jesus shouldn't have come back to life. Like, this is interesting. This is new. This is crazy, even like that they're experiencing this. And they have their own doubts with it. Thomas, right after this encounter, begins to question Jesus. I'm like, what's going on here? How is this happening? But ultimately, I want us to focus on the fact that the disciples have found themselves in a place of fear. They're really scared. In this particular season, in this particular climate of their life, there was a lot of reason to be scared. There was a lot of reason to be anxious about exactly what all this meant. Let me put it this way. It was logical for them to hide, because who knows what these leaders could do to them. And they've been following this Jesus guy for the last 3 years. They've been the closest people to Jesus for the last 3 years. Everyone who's seen Jesus has seen them, right next to him. There's all kinds of reasons for them to be afraid. And Jesus enters in the midst of their fear, in the midst of their anxiety, in the midst of their isolation, and says, peace be with you. Peace be with you. So for us today, if we hear nothing, if there's just very little that we take from this particular sermon, this Life Connection, I hope it's that we can hear Jesus whispering, peace be with you. We need to find a way to find peace in the midst of this anxiety, in the midst of this concern, in the midst of all the fear and even all the fear mongering that exists right now. So peace be with you. Now, if it was only that easy, right? If it was only that easy to just be like, peace be with you. Well, if Jesus showed up physically here, maybe I would be in a more peaceful place, Justin. But there's all kinds of reasons right now that I don't have peace in my life because everything is being disrupted. And look, I'm with you. I get it. I totally understand. I've got 3 children, 10, 8, and 5. And we are going to be home together for 2 weeks. And that will mean some really good times. And it will also mean some times of like, oh my gosh, I'm quarantined with 3 kids, 10 and under. This is crazy. But ultimately, even amidst all of our fears and all of our anxieties, there are some other parts of Scripture that give us some habits maybe that we can consider in the midst of our fears, in the midst of our anxieties. Because here's the deal. It is human to have fears. It is human to have anxiety. Jesus does not chastise the disciples for their fear. He just encourages them to have peace. Fear is a normal response for us as human beings, especially amidst crises like the one we're going through right now. So, first, I think we can pray and we can be thankful. There's a passage in Philippians 4:6 that says this: don't worry about anything. That's a hard one. Instead, pray about everything. What that's really saying is it's saying, whatever you're worried about, pray about it. Don't worry about it. You're not gonna do anything by worrying, by taking all of this time and mental energy and emotional energy and worrying about it. Instead of worrying and actively doing that, actively pray. Pray about everything. Pray about all the things that you're worried about. And so this is a great opportunity right now for us to consider transforming our prayer life. Maybe our prayer life is that we rarely ever pray. Maybe every time we pull a meal out to eat, we say a quick 10-second prayer and then we're on with our day. And we really haven't created a rhythm of prayer. We also maybe haven't created a rhythm of acknowledging what we're grateful for, or these gratitude rituals and thankful rituals. And so the passage continues. The same passage in Philippians 4:6 says, tell God what you need. So in your prayers, ask God what you need and thank him for all he has done. So part of easing our anxiety is taking it in prayer to God, but then also acknowledging the things that we do have. Like, I think that's so key because often our anxieties are driven by what we currently don't have. And so, how is your situation positive? How is your situation something to be thankful for? Like, do you have a house? Do you have food? Do you have a car? Like, there's all kinds of things that we can pause and say, wow, I should be incredibly thankful right now. I'm so thankful for my situation right now in this moment. So don't worry about all the things that are happening. Instead, when those moments of worry pop in, when those moments of anxiety and fear pop in, create a rhythm of praying about that immediately. Or create maybe a daily ritual. I'm going to wake up and pray. And then as I go to bed, I'm going to pray. Or during the day, here's some times where I'm going to pray. And what I'm doing during these prayers is not saying something ritualistically that is meaningless. If that works for you, that's great. But I think the better thing to do is maybe when that fear pops in your head, maybe you see something or you hear something, you're on social media, someone says something, and you begin to feel this like fear kind of welling up in you, you pause and say, you know what? That fear right there, I'm taking that to God. God, I'm afraid. I just saw this. I want to acknowledge the fact that this brought anxiety into my spirit, and I'm going to ask that you take this from me. I'm going to ask that as I hand this to you, you are going to take it, and ultimately you are going to bring into my spirit peace, because you say peace be with you, and I'm going to trust in that, and I'm going to hand you this. Now, I just want to be very clear. This does not mean we're just going to do whatever we want because we don't need to be afraid of anything, or we don't need to be concerned about anything. Look, I don't want you to be fearful, but I also want you to be responsible. This is a global pandemic and we need to be mindful of that, but we also need to not lead with fear. The scriptures tell us there is no fear in love, and we are called to love not only our neighbor, but ourselves. And so when you are gripped by fear, when anxiety is kind of just crippling your spirit, this is not a great way of loving yourself through something like this. So we are going to pray. We are going to acknowledge the things in our life that we are thankful for. And then there is this passage in James chapter 1, verses 2-4, and it says this: "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy." Wow. "For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." I think the mindset that we might consider in this season is that opposition is always an opportunity. Now, that doesn't mean we should go looking for certain oppositions, but when they come our way, when they're out of our control, and for us, we have to take measures to change our ordinary rhythms of life, we can either see that opposition as a negative and just only a negative, or we can see it as an opportunity. And here's what I'm going to say. I think this is an opportunity for each and every one of us to consider how we better love ourselves and one another. Some of you have been running the rat race of work so hard that this season might be a season where you finally take a step back, take a breath that you didn't even know you needed, but you needed it. Now, I would love for that to come in a different way, but maybe this season will be that for you. For some of us, we've needed to connect to our loved ones in a more meaningful way, and we're going to do that while we are gathered together in our houses. For some of us, the opportunity here is that we get an opportunity to love our neighbors, our actual neighbors that are next door. We maybe get a chance to care for needs in our community in a new way that we haven't even considered up to this point. But maybe there's going to be some missional opportunities that express themselves that we can do in a way that is safe amidst this. And ultimately, we're going to get a chance to put hands and feet to the love that we say is inside of us. I want us to consider how this trial, how this difficulty might actually be something that builds our faith, not challenges it. And so, what are the ways in which we can grow in love even through this time. I believe there is an opportunity here for each and every one of us. That's probably going to be different for you than it is for me. And it's probably going to be different for someone else than it is from you. Like, we all each need to seek out what the opportunity might be here. But that is a change in mindset. James is asking these individuals. And the interesting thing about the book of James is, like, these people have been pushed away from their homes. They are out on the run. They've just left Jerusalem for fear of persecution and fear of death, and they're all scattering. And the first thing he says when he opens his book is, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds." It's like, all of these troubles you're experiencing, consider it joy. Interesting. He's saying, even in this opposition, this moment where you have been displaced from your home and you may never come back, there's an opportunity. Hey, if James can say to someone who's been displaced for fear of death, maybe even having to just grab whatever they can with their hands and run out the door with their families so that they can survive what will ultimately be death if they stay, if he can say that that opposition they're experiencing has an opportunity in it, an opportunity to grow their faith, then I would say through this particular trial that we're experiencing, there may be an opportunity for our faith to grow. So instead of being afraid, instead of seeing this entirely as negative, where can we find the opportunity for growth, for spiritual growth, for emotional growth, for personal growth? What are some of the ways that we can maybe even grow through this challenging time? Maybe grow closer to Jesus in our spiritual practices. Ultimately, we're going into the unknown. We don't know what next Sunday is going to look like here in our area and beyond. We just don't know. It's, on Friday night, I was supposed to run a talent show. My kids do a talent show, and I'm one of the organizers for the talent show. And we had 27 acts of kids. It was going to be a pretty big production. And one of the acts was going to sing the Frozen 2 song, Into the Unknown. And so, like, even as I reflect on that reality, like that song, that particular movie, we are going into the unknown. And when we go into the unknown, it's scary. We like to have everything planned out. We like to know what's coming next. Ultimately, we don't. And this is where I think we have to have responsibility, but we also have to have our faith. Like, our faith hopefully will allow us to endure this season of opposition, this season of trial, this season of trouble, staying connected to Jesus, staying connected to the way of love for the good of all. So as we go into the unknown, which we all are journeying into the unknown together. So as we go into the unknown today and in the coming weeks, may we consider love as our compass. Because ultimately, we don't know which directions are going to open up in all of this. But what we can commit to is that love will be our compass in the way that we relate to others and in the way that we relate to ourselves. The scriptures say, love your neighbor as yourself. And we often miss in that there's a call to love ourselves. And so through this challenging time, may we love our neighbor and may we love ourselves in maybe a renewed way. Maybe we get a new opportunity in both those areas to grow and expand our love. And so may you do that through this season. I want to say a prayer for you real quick. Good and gracious God, I pray for everyone out there watching this video. I just pray that your voice of peace would be with them, that they would feel your presence amidst them right now. Maybe there's a lot of fear in their life. Maybe there's a lot of anxiety. Maybe there's a lot of trouble that they're experiencing with this. God, I just pray that your spirit would be there declaring peace be with you, and that they would feel that peace that the scriptures say passes all understanding. God, your peace passes all of our own personal understanding, and we're so thankful for it. And so may that peace rest amongst all of us today and in the days to come. And God, may you open up the ability for us to commune with you more through this season. maybe as we feel those fears return or as we feel those anxieties creep up, we will create rhythms of prayer, rhythms of casting those burdens onto you, bringing them to you, God. And knowing that as we do that, you are there in commune with us, God, as we seek to have maybe some more contemplative practices of prayer, practices of reminders daily to connect with you. God, help us. And God, as we look at the opposition in our world, as we maybe even remain connected, whether that's through news or friends or social media, however we get the news of our world, God, may we continue to see the opposition that we experience as an opportunity to grow in love for ourselves and love for others, God. And ultimately, may we be thankful even for what we do have, for the fact that for some of us, we're right next to people we love and we get to experience this. God, let us take a moment to pause and reflect on all that we have to be thankful for, even in a season where there's so much uncertainty. And God, as we journey into the unknown over the next few days and weeks, God, we pray that you would give us a spirit of faith and not fear, of love, God. In the name of Jesus, amen. All right, well, a few quick announcements for you. We will be posting videos here and there this week. I'm not sure exactly the extent of that. Our board is discussing some different things that we might consider moving forward, maybe even expanding some of our technological capacities to bring you more content this week, maybe even a daily reflection, something like that. Not as long as a Life Connection or a sermon, but something that you can maybe take a couple minutes to center yourself with. So that might be coming out tomorrow or later this week. Ultimately, we are praying for each and every one of you. If you're part of our community, you have needs, please let us know. We would love to know what those are and see if there's any way that we can help in that. We are also, just to keep you all posted, especially those of you in Central PA that are watching this, we are trying to Monday consider things like Sanctuary Harrisburg and some other things that we're connected to and how we can be a resource in this season for the individuals that are going to be impacted by that. And so there may be some missional opportunities. Again, we have to be mindful of how we execute those in a healthy way. And so those are some things we're considering right now even. And then beyond that, right now, having not discussed this with the board, but it just seems as if we should go on with the mindset that services are canceled for the foreseeable future until we would let you know that we have a service on again. And so as you think toward next Sunday, I would just say plan on that Sunday being a digital gathering again. Really want to encourage you to share these videos. There's also an opportunity here maybe for people to connect digitally to the love of Jesus in this way. Maybe they just need someone to tell them not to be afraid right now. What a great opportunity for you to share this video, for you to connect with others in that way, to connect with your friends in that way. And so just want to encourage you to share this, to continue to come back to our social media and to our website, and also on our email list. I think we'll be sharing this out. So there's a lot of ways to connect here. I just want to let you know that at the Belong Collective, we're doing everything we can to be here for you and to provide for you in this season, as we're not going to be able to provide physical gatherings. So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you later.